In today's video, we're looking at Ubisoft wanting to release 3 or 4 major games before March 2020, essentially within this fiscal year. I want to speculate as to what those games might be. We pretty much already know one of those games, but outside of that, if it's 3 games, we don't really know what those other 2 games might be. I want to give my ideas. Also, it looks like Sony is going to be staying committed to PlayStation VR. In an interview with Gaming Bold, Pablo Lafora of Tessera Studios, the developers of the PSVR horror title Intruders Hide and Seek, spoke a little bit about that. So I want to take a look at that. Also, Left Alive is one of the more anticipated games of this early 2019 period. It's a game that I'm really looking forward to, and I think Square Enix has a lot of hopes into this game really resonating with gamers. A new gameplay video has just been released, and it's an in-depth 14-minute gameplay demo, so I do want to give you guys an overview of that. Also, Devil May Cry 5 looks to have no DLC plans after the release of Bloody Palace, and Bloody Palace will be a free piece of content that'll be released in April. The PlayStation 5 backwards compatibility talks is starting once again as Sony has filed another patent. I think that backwards compatibility is almost a certainty for the PS5. The real question is, what's the extent of the backwards compatibility? And also, we have some gameplay details about The Outer Worlds, one of the more anticipated games of 2019. That's coming from Obsidian, and we'll look at that at the end of this video. First up, Ubisoft wants to release 3 or 4 major games before March 2020. This is coming directly from their earnings call, and they want to specifically release these games within this fiscal year, so from 2019 until March 2020. Now, what could those games be, and what classifies as a major game? Well, Ubisoft really only has one major title announced thus far, and that is Skull and Bones. You would have to think that Skull and Bones would be released sometime in 2019. Beyond Good and Evil 2 is also announced at this point. Honestly, I don't know when that game is going to be released, and I don't even know if that's in the plans before March 2020. I know we're working on a long time frame. However, Beyond Good and Evil 2 is still pretty early on, and that game has just been stuck in development for a very long time. Other games filling out that lineup could be a new Splinter Cell game that's been teased upon a lot. We've seen so many teases of a new Splinter Cell game. I think it's about time that we see Sam Fisher back in action. The last time we saw a Splinter Cell game was all the way back in 2013 with Blacklist, and Blacklist came right before the release of the PlayStation 4. I thought timing was just really bad for that game. If anything, I would like to see a remaster of Blacklist on the PlayStation 4, see how that's received, and then go to the new Splinter Cell game. I definitely think the gaming world is clamoring for a new Splinter Cell title, and also I think the most notable one, Watch Dogs 3. Watch Dogs 3 is another title that I think Ubisoft is prepping up. Are we gonna see that this year? I could very well see that. I could see Watch Dogs 3 being announced around the E3 timeframe and then being released right into the fall. I think that's the best way to do Watch Dogs 3. I don't think that's the kind of game you just want to show off and then continually release gameplay footage. I think it's best to go the Fallout 4 route with that game, where you just announce the game and then it comes out a couple months later. We've seen that's a pretty good way to go when releasing games, especially games that are a part of more notable IPs. That's just speculation on my part. I do think Skull and Bones is going to be out this year. Everything else is really a crapshoot. I could see a new Splinter Cell, I could see a Watch Dogs 3, but do know that Ubisoft is planning on 3 or 4 major games before March 2020. Also, in an interview with Gaming Bold, Pablo Lafora of Tessera Studios, the developers behind the PlayStation VR horror title Intruders Hide and Seek, said some interesting stuff. Here's the exact quote: PSVR is an add-on and PS Move is 9 years old already. It worked great and it doesn't seem like they had it planned from the beginning. Sony knows VR and AR is the future, so I think VR will have a much more important role in PS5. We think the console has been designed with VR in mind from the very beginning, so it probably won't be an add-on anymore, though that doesn't mean it's going to be a VR gadget exclusively, so yes, VR will be very important in PS5. I think what's going to be an incredibly important factor is the PlayStation 4 VR headset going to work with the PlayStation 5, or are we going to have to buy new PlayStation VR headsets? I think that would disappoint a lot of people. The PlayStation VR was already a hefty investment. We're talking some people paid $400, some people paid $500 for the bundle. At this point, it's a little bit cheaper with bundles being sold for like $250 on sale, but still, that's a very big investment, and if you can utilize the PlayStation VR headset we have now with the PlayStation 5 and we have to buy a new headset altogether, that would be pretty disappointing. What I think will end up happening is the PlayStation 5 will have its own headset, but the PlayStation 4's VR headset will be compatible with the PS5. How that factors in, are some games going to be exclusive to one VR headset while others are playable on all VR headsets? I don't know. It's really a muddy situation with that. It's something not a lot of people are talking about, but it is something that I'm very interested to see and how it plays out, because I have been a big proponent of PlayStation VR. I think the library has just gotten better and better, and it will be an integral part of the PlayStation 5, and I expect the games will only get better next generation. Moving on from that, Left Alive is one of the more interesting games that Square Enix has put out in a very long time. It's still a game that, yes, while it's being released on March 5th, we don't know much about it. We know that there was a star-studded studio working on the game, a star-studded cast, and now we have gotten a 14-minute gameplay video showing a variety of the game's different gameplay mechanics and strategies. If you're unaware of the premise of Left Alive, here it is. Left Alive challenges players to enter a war-torn city of Novosava and use their skills to overcome the overwhelming enemy forces against them. The in-depth video delves into the motivations of each of the three main characters and presents them in different situations. By sneaking through the environment, using crafted traps to avoid confrontation, or facing enemies head-on using powerful weaponry known as Wanzers, players must use every option available and find the best route to survival. Left Alive is due out in Japan on February 28th, so we're probably going to hear about how the game is then. As far as a North American release, it'll be out March 5th. But definitely a game to keep your eyes on. We'll leave a link in the description box down below for that 14-minute gameplay demo through the Warzone. Another one of March's major PlayStation 4 game releases is Devil May Cry 5, and we know that after the release of DMC5, in April, we'll get the free update for Bloody Palace. Essentially, that's a wave-by-wave mode where you go floor by floor, you fight a variety of different demons and bosses, but the question remains, will there be more DLC after the release of Bloody Palace? Well, it looks like no. Somebody asked over on Twitter to producer Matt Walker if there will be DLC for Devil May Cry 5 after the Bloody Palace, and he responded bluntly saying, nope, only plans currently are for Bloody Palace. Maybe that's a little bit disappointing to you guys, but Devil May Cry kind of stays as its own experience. I don't really see a need for DLC. You play through it once, maybe you'll dabble into the Bloody Palace mode, which was rather good in the other Devil May Cry games, but they have also said that Devil May Cry 5 will be a relatively lengthy experience at around 15 hours, which for a Devil May Cry game is quite long, so we'll see how that turns out. But at the very least, you'll have the full game to check out, you'll have the free DLC in Bloody Palace in April, so there's a lot to digest with Devil May Cry 5. Hopefully the game turns out well, because it's great to see Devil May Cry finally come back to gaming. Moving on from that, it looks like Sony has filed yet another patent leading to speculation about the PlayStation 5 and backwards compatibility. This patent, in fact, was registered directly under Mark Cerny's name, and it's supposedly pointing to a method of backwards compatibility that would, again, in theory, let the PlayStation 5 run PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4 titles. I think at this point, it's a foregone conclusion that the PlayStation 5 will have backwards compatibility, because could you imagine if the PlayStation 5 was released and the next Xbox had full backwards compatibility and the PlayStation 5 didn't even have backwards compatibility to PlayStation 4 games? Yeah, that would be an absolute train wreck. I'm sure Sony knows that they can't let that happen. The real question is, will we have full backwards compatibility? That's what I really want, because that would open the floodgates in a variety of different ways. Not only would that allow us to play PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PS4 games, and you have a gigantic library across all four of those platforms, but also, what does that mean for PlayStation Now? PlayStation Now all of a sudden would become this incredible service, especially if you could download all of the PlayStation 3 games on there, if you could add PS2 and PS1 games on there. Man, the potential for PlayStation Now at that point becomes absolutely limitless, so backwards compatibility not only would be great inherently, because backwards compatibility is awesome and we want that in gaming, but for PlayStation Now, that would be huge. PlayStation Now has become a service that more people want to subscribe to because PlayStation 4 games are directly downloadable, and it's great to be able to stream the PS3 games, but the option to actually download them, well, that would make PlayStation Now a much more enticing service, similar to what Microsoft is doing with Game Pass. Game Pass has got Xbox One titles, Xbox 360 games, and original Xbox games. Well, could you imagine PlayStation Now having PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, and PS5 games? Man, that would be insane. But we'll keep you guys posted on it. I think if you are worried about the PlayStation 5 not having backwards compatibility, you should really put those worries to rest. In some form, it will have backwards compatibility. And lastly, we do have some new gameplay details about The Outer Worlds. This is coming from an in-depth interview over on Game Informer, and the narrative designer of the game said this about the title. Quote, even if you lose a points-based morale system, I think you gain something by handcrafting specific moments where a companion is like, why would you do this? You're completely out of your mind. And this also gives the player an interesting opportunity to say, you might be thinking that, but here are my reasons why, and sometimes we can attach that to a persuade or leadership check, and that helps the player feel more rewarded. With a game like ours, there's a balance balance you have to strike because you don't have to recruit the companions. You can have a full complete experience of our game minus the companion content if you never recruit them, but at the same time we do want them to feel very involved for the players who choose to bring them along. While we have to be careful not to make them mandatory, we also look for ways to bring them in. So companion content is completely optional, but it's probably something you'll want to delve into. As I've said in the past, the Outer Worlds looks to be a relatively small experience when you compare it to other open world RPGs. It's been said it'll be around 30 to 40 hours in length, which I think is fine. 30 to 40 hours is a lot of content, and this is a game that's going to have a gigantic amount of replay value as well. The Outer World is scheduled for a release sometime in 2019. And that's going to conclude this video. Again, Ubisoft is looking to release 3 or 4 major games before March 2020. What could those games be? Well, we know Skull and Bones. Could it be a new Splinter Cell? Watch Dogs 3 seems likely, but outside of that, there might be a surprise or two in there. It looks like VR is going to be a big component of PlayStation 5. Left Alive has gotten 14 minutes of new gameplay ahead of its March 5th release. There are no plans for Devil May Cry 5 DLC. PlayStation 5 backwards compatibility is pretty much a formality at this point, and we got some new gameplay details on the Outer Worlds. That game is shaping up very nicely. That's going to conclude this video. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.